single family investors all the way to the multifamily investors. For some reason, they take construction very lightly. The scope of work, the contract, when we're buying these apartments, we've got our agreements that are really thick. We've got our loan agreement that's really thick, but then our construction agreement, we don't put a lot of thought into. And same thing with the scope. It's not very detailed. I'm not saying everybody, but I've seen it with a lot of investors. I think it's really important as your operating agreement to your business. If things go wrong, that's what you're going to look at is your agreement and what it says in there. You should know what it says and you should make sure it's covering all aspects.
George, welcome to the show today.
How you doing?
And doing well. So it's been a little while since you were on the show. You were on the show a little while ago, and a lot has happened since then. So get us up to speed. Give us a little background on yourself, George, for people who did not listen to that last podcast episode, and then catch us up to speed maybe the last 12, 18 months.
Sure. So short version, I've been in real estate for about 15 years, full-time real estate investor. Started with single family, kind of worked my way up to now just focusing on large multifamily, whether it's new development or existing. Started a construction company in that journey. It's been about 11 years since I started the construction company, and that was to scale the investments. It's been crucial. It's really helped me scale, and I've been able to get into a lot of syndications because of that, and my focus on the CapEx and being able to deliver on the business plan. As far as portfolio goes, at this point, acquired about right under 7,000 units and exited about 1,500 units.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, why did you start the construction company? You said 11 years ago. So that was maybe before you got into multifamily, or why did you start that company?
Yeah, it was when I was still doing single family, and I was focusing a lot on fix and flips. I liked it. I liked transforming the properties and obviously adding the value and then selling them. Actually didn't like managing them. I had a rental portfolio back then, but I enjoy the large multifamily a lot better than the small single. But so the construction came in because I was trying to scale it, and the bottleneck I kept running into was finding a good contractor. We got burned a few times. I had some experience. My uncle owns a construction company. I worked with him for 2 years during college, and being an engineer, I actually out of college with my electrical engineering degree, I went to work for UPS in what they called the engineering department, but really I was the GC for UPS. So yeah, that's why I started it, was to scale the fix and flips, and it worked. We got up to about 50 or so a year on just the fix and flips. And then as I transitioned over to new development and also existing multi, I changed the focus of the construction company as well.
Now, what percentage of your business is construction at this point?
When you say construction, like new development projects, or?
Well, that depends. Okay, so of your portfolio, what percentage is new construction, and then how much is existing? Let's start with that.
Yeah, so the new construction's maybe about 10%, 5%. I keep it to 1 to 2 projects at a time.
Yeah.
So definitely my main focus is the existing multi, and then heavy CapEx construction. It's probably about, at this point, and that's changed a lot in the last 12 months. We've 12 to 18 months, we've taken down more A-class type deals, which still have some CapEx, but very minimal. I would say maybe 70% are heavy CapEx projects.
Yeah, we found ourselves in a similar position that you maybe found yourself. We kind of woke up one day and we're like, crap, we're in the construction business, right? Like we thought we're in the real estate business, and we found that we're actually in a construction business, and it was weird. It's like, man, we spend a lot of time on construction. And of course, initially, I think a lot of people do this when they get started. They will outsource a lot of the construction to either a general contractor or their property manager, or a combination of both. And then like you experience in your house flips, it's like you got these very mixed results. You
Yep.
can't get really good. And so, I think as you start scaling a little bit, construction becomes more of an issue. And you recognize that in your house flips as well. But what are some of the issues that you saw early on when you didn't have your own construction company? Like, what were some of the issues you were running into as you were trying to scale?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to property management, right? Like when somebody begins to scale in multifamily, a lot of the times you see the transition to in-house property management, and it's because it's harder to put your own systems and processes into play when you're hiring a third party. Same goes with the construction. There's certain things you can put into play, especially if you're controlling the materials. That helps some, but it's also harder to find just labor. A lot of the GCs want to do the material and the labor. So I think it was mainly to be able to scale and produce the same quality product throughout our portfolio. The way I saw that was to bring it in-house.
Yeah, George. So when you started out, you had you had to scale the construction company. I'm just curious, how did you kind of figure out who you're going to hire and what that was going to look like for you to make it work efficiently through that scaling process?
So in the beginning, I was the project manager, the everything, right? The first bottleneck that I ran into was the project management. There's only so many projects I can manage. So that was I take it back. My first was an assistant, right? But I was still the main manager. And once I grew out of that, then it was, okay, I need to find a project manager that I can train to follow the same systems and procedures that I've put in place and run the project as well as I can, or maybe even better if they've got more experience than I do. So that was the first hire. And then it starts to trickle effect, and you've got more back office because you got more projects. So you need to start adding on there. But I will say finding a good construction project manager is probably, at least in my experience, one of the hardest positions to find.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's kind of like a lot of the projects you're dealing with, right? They pivot around that person, right? And so in our experience, we started out, I think, with some of the earlier projects, we were just relying on the property management company to do our construction. And it's good in a sense where they can, you might have that synergy, and if the operations and the construction are both working, that could be a good thing. However, in our first instance, we found that the operations were not doing well. And because the construction was going well, we were holding on to the bad operations for a minute because we felt like we were tied in. So we quickly realized we're like, well, that's probably not the best idea, actually. And so when we switched management companies, eventually we got into with the new company. They didn't have a construction arm, so we were kind of forced to build our own. And that was like, we're like, well, this is really hard, but at the same time gives us the freedom to be flexible. We don't have to rely so much on or worry about if the operations go bad, we can't make that pivot. So I think that's not a lot of syndicators. I don't think everyone has maybe the ability to do that kind of in-depth construction. I mean, there's definitely people out there, but I think it does give you a competitive advantage. And I'd like to hear about that with you. Like, what have you found as far as having that competitive advantage with that looks in business?
I mean, definitely, I agree with you 100%. A lot of the things you said, one being bringing the construction in-house allows management to worry about just management, right? The work orders and leasing and that type of stuff. And allows you to then focus on the CapEx separate. Then what we found, and I'm sorry, what was the question again?
No, I want to know, so what kind of a competitive advantage does it give you?
Got it. Yes.
Yeah, to have your own
Yeah. So
construction
it's
arm.
allowed us to look at these heavy lifts, which usually when you're looking at a property that needs a lot of CapEx, you're going to have less buyers. So, less competition. And then it allows us to come in with a confident offer. Not a lot of guessing, not a lot of, we think we can get it done for this. It's no, we've looked at this. My team's looked at this. We know we can get it done for this price. We can make a good offer and then hopefully land a deal.
Yeah, and part of it is you feel confident in your numbers. So if you're going into your CapEx budget and you don't know construction, or maybe it's getting bid out and it's not the right fit or whatever it is, you can go in and get the money from the lender. Or if you're just doing cash CapEx, you can go in confident knowing that your numbers are correct versus you're going in with, some budget that could be made up and you get into the project and, oh no, you don't have enough money, or, things aren't turning out the way they thought. And so I think, that's another part of it that at least what we found is has been helpful in that arena. So George, did you also pivot into doing like fee managed deals, like third party construction, or is it just all your own stuff?
We do. I mean, okay. So before, when I started the construction company, it was maybe 50-50. It even started tilting a little more towards the third party. Right now that we're 100% focused on multifamily, it's probably more 70-30, 80-20. Most of it is in-house projects, but we do like partnering with other investors that we're looking for those long-term relationships where we can step in and the investors maybe realize that, hey, giving it to the property manager probably is not the best thing, but they also don't want to take it on themselves. So we're kind of like the in-between. So yeah, really good relationships on the third party, but still we don't have to rely on the third party, which I think puts us in a nice position.
I mean, as people are starting out, they're going to rely on their property manager for construction. And it depends a little bit on the scale of the construction. Smaller property, a lot of property managers can handle that. But as they get larger and they get heavier lift, sometimes they have a construction project manager in-house. We've had that experience, and they will charge you 5-6% of the budget to oversee that. And we actually did that for a little while until we realized that we weren't really getting good results. We're like, you know what, why don't we charge a 5 or 6% development fee? And now we will bring this project manager in-house, right? And that manager now will manage everything. So it's kind of a little bit of a journey that we were on. And what you were saying, it is really hard to find a project manager. How have you gone about, and it sounds like you've been doing this for a while, so you've probably been working with at least more than one project manager. How have you been able to find that right project manager? What are you looking for there?
Yeah, I mean, I've had, I don't know, 20 plus project managers at least. Right now we've got four project managers on staff with some site supervisors. So, that's a whole other position that kind of falls under the project manager, where if you've got a project manager managing several projects, it's nice to have some site supervisors to help them put eyes on the projects when they're not there. But finding that project manager, our interview process is pretty long process. Several people in my staff, including myself, interview the project manager. We're looking, and this is almost for any position. So one is the individual. Do they have the same core values that we carry? Like, is it somebody I want to work with? I've learned throughout the years that that's number one. If I'm not getting that feeling and through the process, the interview process, it's just not lining up, then forget it. Then experience, but at the same time, you don't want them set in their ways. At least we don't, because we have different ways of managing projects, and we use a lot of software. And so, sometimes a lot of experience and kind of old school way of doing things doesn't quite work for us. But so we go through a lot of questions, and our interview process is very open-ended on a lot of the questions we ask and the things we ask them to do. And it's evolved through the years, but I mean, it works for the most part. Before it was a lot of hiring and having to fire. Now, usually when we hire somebody and they go through that process, they're sticking around.
So like, what's like an open-ended question you would ask? Put you on the spot, George.
No, it's all good, man. I would say we've done some where we give somebody an estimate for one of our projects, and we ask them, okay, our estimator gives you this. What's your next step? You got this project.
That's great.
In 2 weeks, what's your next step?
That's great. So you kind of like you plug them into like in the middle of a project or something, or in somewhere in the process.
Yeah, and that's one for like, if I want to know what they're doing, and then there's some that I'll ask for an individual, like their core values and stuff. I'll just, ask them. Oh shoot, man, that one you got me, man. Very simple, even like their goals, or just, maybe a generic question that you hear, but I shut up. Like, I do not say another word. It's like almost uncomfortable silence until they start talking. I really want them to just start talking freely.
Yeah, that's really good. How do you know if they're the one?
How do I know? I mean, if they check off the things I said, right? Like if okay, and we discuss internally. So at the minimum, it's going to be my construction manager and myself, depending on the position. But at the minimum, it's going to be 2 people. So after we interview them, we discuss, we go through everything. We talk about the person, do we feel like they fit the company and our core values? And then we go to the experience factor and whether they can handle what the job entails. It's all back and forth. I definitely don't push my views or thinking like onto my construction manager.
Yeah, you ask them first, right?
Yeah.
Hey, what do you guys think? Same thing. Yeah, that's super smart. I'm curious. So the hardest part in my mind, at least in my opinion, of owning multifamily and trying to, our business plan is we're buying properties that are in great areas. We want to take them from like typically a C to a B. They're decent lifts. We're putting in, 35, maybe 40 a door in an overall construction. But the consistent challenge are the interiors, right? Where the juice
100%.
is. So talk to us about, how do you navigate that? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, interiors is by far the hardest part of it, right? Keeping
Well,
up.
tell people why it's so hard first. Tell us what you do.
Yeah, so I mean, look, it's hard for several reasons. One is finding the labor that can do it consistently and do it at a affordable price. 2 is that the pace that you need to keep it at, right? I mean, you need to be able to do this quickly. It depends on the project, the type of project, but either way, you want to be able to turn the properties, I mean, the units quick, right? Some of that relies on the project manager, but a lot of it is finding the right crews. And then depending on if you're mobilizing somewhere else. I mean, I don't know if we want to go that far into it, but I know you guys do a lot of projects where you're not there physically. Same as us, we do have a lot of projects in Texas where I'm at, but we also have projects outside of Texas. So in that scenario, we do have traveling crews. So we have crews they'll come from Texas, and they'll usually stay on the property unless it's the occupancy is really high. Maybe we'll find something outside, and and then the materials, getting the materials there, making sure there's so many things that can slow a project down. The last thing you want it to be is materials. Like you want to make sure they've got everything they need. And that's a whole other beast, managing part of it.
It's a beast. It's like, what happens is if you do it wrong, you could get the blame game. And during COVID, there was a lot of issues going on where things would come in late or they wouldn't show up at all. And then maybe you hired the labor and they're like, well, we can't work, and you're delayed 2 days. And then the project goes from taking, maybe 21 or 30 days to 2 months, and they blame you and you blame them. So that's some of the challenge when you try to match materials, labor, and then the inventory side of it as well. So I'm assuming you guys do quite a bit of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we do everything. Day one, we're dropping our metal containers on site. We're getting the materials ordered, and then getting our crews there, and they've got pretty much everything they need. We do have a site supervisor in case there's some materials that we need to go get. One thing I didn't mention, which is another reason why interiors is difficult, is the profit margins are horrible for a GC. For us to take on a third party work that's just interior units, I gotta really like you, because it's a lot of work for not a lot of money.
Yeah. So, and then we hear this a ton too, where we have contractors that they're like, well, yeah, it takes up so much bandwidth for us. I need so many guys to do these interiors. I don't make that much. So we have to feed them a few exterior deals to keep them interested, because if you give them only interiors, they're going to be like really either price gouging the heck out of you, or they're just unmiserable. And so, that's where it gets challenging, is you kind of have to have someone else where there's larger margins, right? If you're selecting people to do it. How many units are you guys doing like a month right now?
Oh man, through all our projects?
Yeah.
Shoot. A month, over 100 for sure. Probably maybe 150.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
But George, you mentioned that you use a lot of software, which you look for, maybe not, people that are set in their ways. And the question really I have is, how do you track all this stuff, and how do you hold your project managers accountable, and how do they hold their subs accountable? What are some of the systems and the software that you use to manage that kind of scale?
So we have a project management software called Builder Trend. That's what we use to manage the day-to-day. Our project managers or site supervisors are posting daily logs, telling us what got done, putting pictures, putting videos. That goes to internally our staff, and then it also goes to the owner. So it helps on that end with third party, where we don't hear a lot from the clients. If we're doing our job communicating, they're happy, they're getting their updates. It also has a calendar in there, so our project schedule is in that same software. It gets adjusted if anything happens. Our change orders, so we haven't really discussed change orders, which
we're getting there, George.
Another fun part of construction, but all the change orders are housed in there and approved through that system, and then that's how we keep our project managers accountable. And then the subs within our agreements, they've got to finish within a certain amount of time. And that one's always a little tricky, because there's the blame game, like you said, right? They're going to blame something. So that's why I'm very strong in making sure that if we're responsible for materials, that the materials are there. They can't point fingers to that. There might be some weather delays here and there, but we can calculate that. And then it helps that we have a lot of projects, and that's really our leverage, is like, hey, you need to get this done if you want to keep working with us. And if you don't deliver, well, you know, we've got other crews waiting. So I think that really is what works more than anything.
Yeah, that leverage is so important. So, you know, we have these guys out there, they know we have a lot of money to spend across all of our sites. And so they see us pulling, you know, jobs from them and giving it to someone else that drives them nuts. So they're more apt to give us what we need in that circumstance. And so what we do is we'll get two different crews and we'll kind of pin them against each other as far as the work quality and their timing. So if we have like 20 apartments to do, we'll give 10 and 10, and we'll run them at the same time and see who beats the other one out. And if this guy wins, we'll give him some more at a different site or something like that.
Yeah.
Just to kind of hold them accountable. One thing I do want to touch on are change orders, because we just mentioned it, but one little trick that happens all the time is you agree on like a contract price, let's say for your interiors, get into the project. This could be for anything. It could be exteriors too. Get into it. And then all of a sudden you're getting change orders for this, oh, there's something missed in the scope, or they found something. And your budget gets blown out, and you had a budget that you thought was set up properly, that you're ready to build your base model on. And that's out the window because of these random change orders. How do you curb them? And how do you set yourself up so you don't get hit with a bunch of them?
I think the first thing is you got to have a solid scope of work, right? And you can't just rely on the contractor building it for you. Like it's got to be detailed. You've got to play a part in that and make sure that change orders are supposed to be unforeseen, right? There shouldn't be, oh, well, lighting wasn't in the scope, so it's not included, you know, that those type of change orders should never happen. So that's one, right? Making sure you've got a detailed scope of work. That's exactly what you want to be doing those units, and it's all spelled out very clear. And then two is looking for some of that unforeseen stuff. So a lot of things that we run into are subfloor issues. You tear up the floors, and then some of that lightweight concrete is all broken up. And we need to go in and do, so we try to pinpoint those things on the front end and kind of put a contingency there for that, and not necessarily using, hopefully you're putting in a contingency on your overall scope, but not even dipping into that, you know, just a separate contingency for if we've got cast iron plumbing, we're going to put a specific contingency for plumbing. We're also going to scope the lines and get a better idea of what we're looking at as well during due diligence, but we're going to put something aside for it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Because we go in, so we've been starting with like our base scope, and then we'll go in and walk each individual apartment, look inside the apartment, make sure that, you know, we're doing it all, or most of the time it's hodgepodge, right? Like you're going into past apartment complexes where different owners are doing different hodgepodge renovations here and there. So the chances of it being completely 100% the base scope going in is probably low. To be honest. So then you got to, you know, maybe you want to save the appliances in there. Well, you shouldn't be charged for that. Maybe, you know, you want to keep the floors because the floors are in good shape, and you're like, you know, it makes sense to keep them here. So that all needs to be scoped out for that specific unit and in detail. But if the problem is that if you go in, you miss one thing, or something gets missed, or you don't put in that allowance for floor level or whatever it is, these guys will come back. They'll try to get over on you. Oh no, this is a change order. So yeah, we have to do this. So I couldn't agree more with you. That detailed scope of work really is the key, and doing pre-walks with that detailed scope works. You have complete visibility into the job that's coming, and anything you have to know, like anything you leave off, there's a good chance they're going to try to bill you for it. And what are you going to say at that point? Well, like, what am I going to not finish a multi-million-dollar project because the lights are broken? I guess I got to eat that, right? And then that's the problem of what you get into with the change orders.
And I don't blame the contractor, right? Maybe it's
right.
I'm also on this side, but you know, it's things cost money, right? They can't do things for free. And
But you could have negotiated it up front, right? That's the
correct,
thing
correct.
that
That's what I
kills
was getting
me.
at. It falls
So
on.
they're making a higher margin on your
Yeah.
mess ups by not calling it out, right?
Correct.
So you
Correct.
could have said, "Oh, the lights are included in that," and they'll be like, "All right, I guess I'll make a couple grand less, but I'll add the lights," right? And then they would have agreed to that up front. Now they just made that margin, and you have to eat the cost, right?
So you could negotiate. Here's a good tip, right? Is we don't do cost plus because that's a nightmare. Like when we give an estimate, it's a lump sum.
And what is cost plus?
Cost plus is I'm going to charge you exactly what I'm paying plus a profit percentage. But to do that, I've got to give you all the backup to everything that I'm paying, and it's just very time consuming and tedious. So we do a fixed price, but we have a separate where it says on the change orders, we'll do a markup. So on a change order, I'll show you what I'm paying plus whatever that markup is. And we can negotiate that on the front end. So that's another, I still think you should have a detailed scope. Don't get me wrong, but that's another angle you can take too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Real quick, one more question. How important are contracts and why are they important into the jobs that you get yourself into?
Man, okay. So I'll say something that I've seen for years, and this was with the single family investors all the way to the multifamily investors. For some reason, they take construction very lightly. Like, the scope of work, the contract, when we're buying these apartments, we've got our agreements that are really thick. We've got our loan agreement that's really thick, but then our construction agreement, we don't put a lot of thought into, and same thing with the scope. It's not very detailed. I'm not saying everybody, but I've seen it with a lot of investors. So I think it's really important. I mean, as important as your operating agreement to your business. I mean, it's if things go wrong, that's what you're going to look at is your agreement and what it says in there. You should know what it says, and you should make sure it's covering all aspects.
Yeah, it's very easy for now. You can just sit back as a property owner and you say, you know what, they screw things up, I'm not paying them. Okay, that's not really the case because contractors have the ability to lien your property, and then they can also sue you if they want to lien. So they have leverage in that regard, where if you guys don't agree on what's owed at the end of a project, and you don't have an airtight contract, and I've made this mistake before, it's a he said, she said situation. And next thing you know, okay, great. Well, I'm going to lien you, and then they can just lien whenever they want. It's the silliest thing ever. There's nothing us as property owners can do about it. We're just like, oh, great, a lien. Now we have to spend money to try to put a bond over it so it doesn't mess with title.
Every subcontractor that works on our property signs a lien release as they get paid. It should be simple practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Practice. Yeah, totally. But you'd be surprised. So the lien, they should all sign conditional lien waivers. Everybody should be signing that just to make sure that you're not getting lien. But you could get into a situation, and the next thing you know, the contract's what dictates the rules of the engagement. You don't have it. These things can come back to bite you. So it's a crazy side of the business. I think what you said, George, about people aren't taking it as seriously as they take the loan agreement or the company agreement with their equity, all those things. Where's the construction agreement? Say we're entering into big contracts. Large amounts of money are being traded, right? And so I think it's so important. George, man, it's been so great to talk to you. I wish we had more time, but we don't. But tell everyone how they can get a hold of you if they want to.
Yeah, our website has got a bunch of information on there. If they go to elevatecig.com, or if they want to shoot me an email and say that they heard me on this podcast, I can send over some free content. I think I've got to hire a GC. I've got a bunch of checklists, due diligence, and other stuff that goes with CapEx. So my email is Jorge, Jorge, Jorge at elevatecig.com.
Awesome. George, thanks so much for coming on the show again, man. It's always a pleasure to have you. And it's awesome to see the amazing work you've been up to.
Yep. Appreciate you guys. Always fun.